rabbit I'd set the snare for was long gone by the time I got back to my camp. I stood there, staring at the empty loop of rope dangling off that low pine branch, and I laughed. A short, tired laugh that didn't have any joy in it. 3 days into these mountains, half a day's ride from the nearest settlement, and the land was giving me nothing. The creek had run shallow. The sky was doing that thing it does in late October up in the Sangre de Cristos, holding itself gray and flat and cold like a piece of hammered tin, and every animal with any sense had already tucked itself away for the season. I wasn't particularly worried about myself. I'd gone lean before, but my horse, 2 Fires, was chewing the last of what I'd brought in his saddlebag, and the way he looked at me when he finished told me everything I needed to know about his opinion of my planning. "I know," I told him. "I know." That's when I heard it. Not a sound exactly. More like the absence of the right sounds. The mountains have a rhythm, wind, branches, the small, quick movement of things living in them. What I heard that afternoon was a break in that rhythm. Something off. A wrongness sitting in the air about a quarter mile to the northeast, up along a rocky switchback that most riders avoided because the loose shale made it hard on horses' hooves. I tied 2 Fires and went on foot. She was sitting with her back against a boulder that was twice her size, and she wasn't moving. For one cold second I thought she was dead. She was so still, so pale, her lips cracked, and her hair coming undone from whatever pins had been holding it. Dark red hair, the color of river clay, spilled across her shoulders and down over the green wool of her coat. The coat was filthy. One sleeve was torn at the elbow. Boots had taken a hard time of it too. The left one had the sole coming away at the toe, held together with what looked like a strip of her own petticoat. I stopped maybe 20 feet away, and I crouched down because I'd learned a long time ago that a frightened person, and anyone who'd been sitting alone and hurt in these mountains for any stretch of time was a frightened person, needed a moment before they needed anything else. "Hey," I said. "Quiet." The way you'd speak to a spooked horse. Her eyes opened. They were green. Not the pale flat green of sage, the deep, complicated green of moving water, and they were looking at me with an expression I'd seen before but not often. That specific look of someone's who has already made peace with dying and is genuinely surprised to find themselves still here. She didn't scream, didn't scramble back. She just looked at me for a long moment and then said, in a voice scraped down to almost nothing, "You're real." "Last I checked," I said. Something moved in her face. Not quite a smile. The ghost of one. "I've been praying for 3 days," she said. I was starting to think no one was listening. Her name was Eleanor Voss. She'd been traveling with her brother, heading to meet their uncle who'd taken land east of Taos. When their wagon lost a wheel coming down off the ridge, the wagon had tipped. Her brother Caleb had gone back down the mountain for help and told her to stay with the wagon and wait. That was 4 days ago. I didn't say what I was thinking, which was that Caleb was either dead, badly hurt, or the kind of man who made promises he couldn't keep. I said, "Can you stand?" She tried. She made it about halfway up, using the boulder, before her legs gave. I was already moving when she started to fall. I caught her. She grabbed the front of my shirt with both hands and held on. Not out of embarrassment or habit, but out of genuine need, the way you hold on to the only solid thing in a flood. She was shaking. Not from cold, though it was cold. From the bone-deep shaking that sets in when a body has been running on nothing but fear and prayer for too long and suddenly, mission to stop. "It's all right," I said. "I've got you." And I meant it. Not as something you say, as a fact. I am Comanche on my mother's side, and white on my father's, which means I have spent most of my 31 years belonging entirely to neither world and navigating carefully between them. My name in my mother's tongue is something that doesn't translate well. It has to do with the quality of silence right before a storm. But in the settlements they called me Cole Maddox, which was my father's name and fit me about as well as a coat 2 sizes wrong. I'd learned early that people decided what I was before I spoke. Whether they found that frightening or useful, or something to be dismissed, depended entirely on what they needed from the land at that moment. Eleanor Voss, sitting against that boulder, had not looked at me like any of those things. She'd looked at me like I was water. That kind of looking does something to a man. Two Fires didn't complain about carrying two people, though he gave me a look over his shoulder that I chose to interpret as professional understanding. I'd gotten Eleanor onto him with more difficulty than I'd expected. Not because of her weight, but because she kept insisting she could help, kept trying to pull her own weight, even when she had nothing left to pull with. Pinked. "You are the most stubborn woman I have encountered in 3 years of working these mountains," I told her. "And I am including the time I met a rancher's wife who rebuilt a collapsed fence by herself in a blizzard." "Was she successful?" Eleanor asked. "She was." "Then I'm in good company." I didn't answer that, but something shifted in my chest. Something small and warm. The way a coal glows brighter when you blow on it. I had a camp set up properly about 2 miles east, in a hollow that the wind passed over rather than through. There was a fire pit, a lean-to I'd built 3 seasons ago and kept stocked, a bedroll, actually, a canvas pack with dried venison, cornmeal, dried beans, and a block of hard sugar that I'd been saving for no good reason for 6 weeks. I got Eleanor to the lean-to and got the fire going. The first real warmth she'd had in 4 days hit her like a physical blow. Her whole body sagged toward it, and she pressed her hands toward the flames with an expression of such pure, unguarded relief that I had to look away. There is something too honest about watching a person warm themselves when they nearly died from cold. It felt like seeing something private. I heated water and made a thin porridge from the cornmeal. She ate it slowly, carefully, the way someone eats when they've been without food long enough to know that rushing it will make them sick. I respected that. Showed she was thinking clearly even through the exhaustion. "Where did you come from?" she asked, between careful spoonfuls. "Before Fia found me. I've been hunting in these mountains for about a month," I said. "Working my way east. I was going to head toward Cimarron come next week. That's where Caleb was going for help." "Cimarron?" I watched the fire. "It's a ride from where your wagon went down." She was quiet for a moment. "I know." She didn't ask me what I thought that meant. I think she already knew. And I think the fact that she didn't ask, didn't need to be handled or softened from the truth, was the second thing I noticed about Eleanor Voss that would take up residence in me and refuse to leave. The temperature dropped hard that night. I gave her my bedroll and slept between the lean-to and the fire, with 2 fires blocking the north wind, which is not comfortable but is survivable, and I've done worse. Sometime past midnight the fire burned low and I got up to add wood, and when I turned back Eleanor was awake, watching me from the bedroll with those complicated water eyes. "You don't sleep much," she said. "I sleep enough. That's not the same thing." It wasn't. "Go back to sleep, Miss Voss." She was quiet for a moment, then, "Thank you for finding me." A pause. "For the everything, all of it." There wasn't a good answer to that, so I just nodded and fed the fire and didn't look at her. Because there is a particular danger in firelight. It makes everyone's face look like the most important face you've ever seen, and that is a thing I had learned not to trust. I trusted it anyway, that night. Quietly, privately, in the way you trust something when you don't intend to act on it. The next morning I found her awake before dawn, sitting outside the lean-to with a blanket around her shoulders, watching the sky turn from black to deep blue, to the kind of pale gray that means the sun is thinking about it. I crouched next to her and handed her the tin cup of bitter black coffee I'd made. She took it, both hands around it, took a long, slow sip and closed her eyes, like it was the finest thing she'd ever tasted. After 4 days in the cold, it probably was. "I want to ask you something," she said. "And I want you to tell me the truth, not the kind version." "All right. Do you think Caleb is alive?" I thought about it honestly, the way she'd asked me to. I thought about 4 days. An injured man, late October, the terrain between here and Cimarron. I think it's possible, I said. I think if he made it to lower elevation before dark on the first day, he had a chance. The cold was bad, but it broke on the second day. I paused. I think it's possible. She nodded. She didn't cry. She just held that cup with both hands and looked at the pale horizon and said, I need to find out. I know. Will you take me to Cimarron? I looked at her. She looked back. In the new light, her face was less pale. More color in her cheeks, the fear largely displaced by something harder and steadier. She looked like someone who had already decided and was only asking as a courtesy. I was going that direction anyway, I said. We rode out at first light. I want to tell you that what happened over the next 2 days was dramatic. Was full of sharp moments and sudden clarity and the kind of turning point conversations that change a person. But it wasn't like that. It was quieter than that. It was the specific quiet of two people on one horse crossing a mountain landscape in late October when the aspens have gone gold and the air smells like cold stone and coming snow. And somewhere in that quiet you start to know each other in a way that has nothing to do with what you say. She asked me about my mother's people. Not the way people usually asked. Not with that thin fascination that was really just appetite for the foreign. But carefully, genuinely, the way you ask about something you sense matters to the person in front of you. I told her things I didn't usually tell. About learning to read the land the way my mother taught me. Not tracking, exactly, but listening. About my grandmother, who had known every plant on the Llano Estacado by name and use. About the particular loneliness of not having a landscape that claimed you without condition. She listened, without interrupting, without filling the silences with sound. I think that's why you're good at what you do, she said eventually. In the mountains, not fighting the land. You're in conversation with it. I had never heard it put that way. It sat with me for a long time. In return, she told me about the farm in Ohio she and Caleb had come from. About her father, who had read to her every night, until she was old enough to take over and read to him. About why she'd agreed to come west, which was not entirely about the uncle's land. It was also, she said, about needing to find out what size she was in a bigger landscape. What do you mean? I asked. I always felt like Ohio was a room I'd already memorized every corner of, she said. I needed to not know things for a while, to feel like there was more. She paused. I didn't expect the mountains to nearly kill me as a welcome. They do that to a lot of people, I said. Are you ever afraid of them? I thought about it. Not afraid. Respectful. There's a difference. Show me the difference. It was such a direct thing to say. So clean and unashamed in its wanting to understand. I found myself talking for the next hour in a way I hadn't talked in years. About what it meant to move through wilderness without fighting it. About reading weather in the light. About why two fires was better company than most people I'd met. At some point, she started laughing. Genuinely, freely, the sound of it lifting out into the cold air, like something recovered. What? I said. You are unexpectedly funny, she said, for a man who introduced himself with approximately 6 words. 7, I said. I said last I checked. She laughed again. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a considerable time, which was that the world was a larger and better place than I had recently been giving it credit for. We came down out of the mountains late on the second day and reached Cimarron at dusk. I want to tell you Caleb was there. He was there. He'd made it down on the second day with a badly broken wrist and a gash above his eye that had bled spectacularly but healed. He'd reached Cimarron on day 4 and immediately organized a search party who had gone looking in entirely the wrong direction because he'd been confused about landmarks coming off the ridge. They'd been searching 2 days. He'd been out of his mind with it. The reunion was. I stayed back for it. Some things don't need witnesses. I stood with 2 fires outside the stable and listened to Eleanor's voice and Caleb's voice and didn't try to parse the words, just the relief in the sound of them. After a while she came out. She walked toward me with her hands in her coat pockets, and her face doing something complicated. "He's alive," she said. "Broken wrist, gash, he's fine." "Good. He wants to thank you. He doesn't need to." She stopped in front of me. We were close, closer than we'd been standing still, and she looked up at me the way she had when she'd first opened her eyes against that boulder. That look of surprised to be here. It was different now. It wasn't survival in the look. It was something that had grown out of the days between. "Cole," she said. It was the first time she'd used my name like that. Without the mister. Without the distance. I didn't move. I didn't trust myself to. "I know you were going east," she said. "I know you have places, and—" "Eleanor," she stopped. "I've been moving east for 3 years," I said. "I have not yet established that there is anything there worth arriving at." The complicated thing in her face shifted, clarified. "My uncle's land is northeast of Taos," she said slowly, "which is east. I know where Taos is. There's work. Caleb and we'd need help. Someone who knows the land. The mountains." Her chin lifted slightly. "Someone who's in conversation with the landscape." I held her gaze for a long moment. Then I held out my hand. She looked at it, looked at me, and then she put her hand in mine, not to shake it, just to hold it. Both our hands still, her fingers cold from the evening air, mine warm from work, and neither one of us letting go. "Spurn. I'm telling you this from the house we built together northeast of Taos. In the spring of the year following, the mountain I can see from my front porch, from our front porch, is one I know now in every season. I know where the water runs in April, and where the elk come in November, and which face of it catches the last light in a way that turns everything color of Eleanor's hair. Caleb built his own place, half a mile north, and has the good sense to stay in it most evenings. 2 Fires is in the pasture. He has opinions about everything, and shares them freely. And Eleanor is the woman who looked at me in the middle of a cold mountain and saw a miracle. Not the other way around. I used to think the mountain called me in. Those 3 days I was hunting with nothing to show for it. I used to think the land was sending me somewhere. Now I know it was sending me to her. The mountains, when you listen to them long enough, tell you everything you need to know. I'm glad I'd learned to listen.